Hi, students. Here we are at the end of our 8 weeks together. And you may be wondering, after you've examined your own leadership capabilities and your feelings about leadership, your philosophy of leadership, where do you go from here in your leadership journey? So, I want to share with you three resources that you might want to check out to see where you want to go and where you want to focus your energies and your leadership abilities. Probably, if you look at all three of these resources, you'll decide that you want to have a combination focus that combines the three focuses or foci of these three resources. But I want to tell you a little bit about them so that you'll maybe consider exploring them and just to give you some different ideas and different directions for where you might want to go with leadership in the future. And each of these books has a slightly different thrust that makes us ask ourselves, should nurse leaders prioritize customers, which of course in most cases are patients, or should they prioritize subordinate nurses, those people that they lead, or should they prioritize themselves? Those are the focal points of these three resources. So let's look at them. Well, first of all, let's think about the book that we've been dealing with for the past 8 weeks, Lee Cockrell's Creating Magic. So when we think about the focal point of this book and who the leadership audience really is for this book, now, looking at the strategies, the 10 strategies that Lee Cockrell covers in Creating Magic, we see that the focus really is more toward employees, how to lead employees. Now, because it's Disney and there's a strong customer focus there, the leading of employees is always very much closely tied to how employees respond to customers. The customer is always at the forefront of the leadership that Lee Cockrell talks about. But he is focusing his philosophies on employees, how employees treat customers, basically, and how leaders treat employees. And then we get into another book that's very similar to the Lee Cockrell book. And I honestly really have to wonder why this book was not chosen as the textbook for this class, because it seems to be incredibly relevant. The Lee Cockrell book doesn't really talk about healthcare at all. Of course, Lee Cockrell does talk about healthcare in the videos that he participated in for this class. But this book by Fred Lee, If Disney Ran Your Hospital, is by a person who was a hospital executive who became a Disney cast member. So he has expertise from both sides, from both the hospitality side and the healthcare side. And the thrust is really very similar to the Cockrell book. Let's look at the table of contents for If Disney Ran Your Hospital. We have redefine your competition and focus on what can't be measured, make courtesy more important than efficiency, regard patient satisfaction as fool's gold, measure to improve, not to impress, decentralize the authority to say yes. Now, this is just half of the table of contents. And just from this, we start to get the idea that this is also, like Cockrell's book, very much directed at leading employees, but I feel that this book has a stronger customer focus than Lee Cockrell's book does. And I particularly want to share with you a little piece from the chapter about patient satisfaction, because patient satisfaction is something that we've talked about in our discussions. That's something that has come up. So I want to just share with you a passage, if you can bear with me for a second here. So this is from his chapter on patient satisfaction. Patient satisfaction looks valuable, but you can't take it to the bank if it doesn't mean that patients will be loyal and sing your praises. When I analyze my own evaluation process, I readily understand the difference between satisfaction and loyalty. Let's say I receive a survey in the mail from a place I had stayed for several days. I think back over my experience and I remember nothing special and nothing bad. Everyone did exactly as I expected. Everyone was polite. Everyone worked. My room was clean. Nothing stood out one way or the other. What would I put on the survey? Probably a score of 4. Here he's talking about a scale, a 1 to 5 point scale. So 5 would be the best, 4 would mean he was satisfied, and 5 would mean he was very satisfied. When you can't remember anything, good or bad, you're satisfied. It takes something memorable to turn an ordinary satisfactory experience into something special. Either something happened that you remember as bad, or something happened that you remember as special. Dissatisfaction comes from the bad. Loyalty is generated by, sorry, lost my place there. Loyalty is generated by memorable things that happen that we didn't expect. So, what he's saying here is that if we want patients to really be satisfied, we really want to go beyond that. Satisfaction is not enough. We want them to be loyal. So the way to loyalty is that patients have to be extremely satisfied. And in this chapter, he goes on to explain that the way patients are really satisfied and feel that loyalty is through elements of compassion, ways that nurses and other healthcare professionals show their compassion, their caring to patients. So, you really have to show exceptional compassion to generate that loyalty in patients. So it's really quite fascinating, and I definitely recommend the book to you, especially since you have experienced the Lee Cockrell book. And I think you'll find it really interesting and a really fascinating add-on to the Lee Cockrell book. Let's look at the rest of the chapters. Change the concept of work from service to theater. That would obviously be something that would come right from the Disney experience. Harness the motivating power of imagination. Again, very much informed by the Disney experience. Create a climate of dissatisfaction, meaning look for things that you can change. Look for ways you can make things better. Cease using competitive monetary rewards to motivate people, and close the gap between knowing and doing. So that is the Fred Lee book that also comes from the Disney experience. Now let's look at another book. Patience Comes Second. Whoa, that's a pretty astonishing concept. And that would seem to fly in the face of exactly what we just talked about, patient satisfaction. Well, how are patients going to be satisfied if our philosophy is that patients come second? Well, I mean, again, really, really a radical idea. And what do the authors mean by this? Well, let me share with you a little bit from the introduction to the book. While the title may seem controversial, once you read the book, you'll see that we are all after the same thing: improving the experience for the patient. There was once a popular business book called The Customer Comes Second. That title could have provided the same response, but it revealed an important truth that spoke to people in the business world. Let's face it, employees in most companies get treated as second class citizens. And I know this is true of you. I've seen this in your discussions, that your working conditions very often are not great. If that's the case, how can we expect them to treat customers well? How can we expect employees who are not treated well by their leaders to treat patients well? This is the same for employees in the healthcare field. In healthcare, we need a model for the delivery of a great experience for each patient. It's not a question of ranking what is more important, but a question of leading and lagging indicators of success. In that regard, I firmly believe, this is the author talking, and there's increasing data to back this up, that the most successful organizations with the most loyal customers or patients have focused first on an internal culture of engagement where leadership shows a genuine interest in the growth and development of its people. If you do that, accountability will only increase, not create excuses for lack of execution. So there's, much more to it than that. And we can best illustrate that not by the table of contents of this book, but by a little sort of assessment in the back of the book. This is an assessment to rate how well your organization treats its employees. And the idea is if the answers to all of these points are yes, then that means the organization treats its employees really well, and employees are likely to treat patients really well. So these points are: our core values are deeply ingrained into our decision-making process. We have fun at work. Can you say that about your workplace? We have a system in place to show that we care about the personal lives of our employees. So if your leaders care about your personal lives, that is a model for you to care about your patients' lives. We hire for fit in addition to skill. Now, that's going to sound really familiar to you based on some of our discussions in this class about hiring for fit and attitude rather than just skills. We saw that in a couple of our discussions. We quickly and appropriately move the wrong people out of the organization. Now, that's going to sound familiar to you as well. You remember the very recent discussion we had about the crazy chef who treated everybody horribly. It was definitely the wrong person, and Cockerell moved him out of the organization relatively quickly within the first 3 months of his employment. And then our employees get personally involved in our community service activities. We regularly measure employee engagement, create action plans, and communicate results. We have a robust reward and recognition program. We talked about rewards and recognitions in the Lee Cockerell book. We execute on our commitment to growing and training our employees, also seen in the Cockerell book. And our employees feel as though they are here for a purpose just beyond their job. So the idea is that if you can say yes to all of these, your organization treats you well, and you are likely to treat your patients well. Now, you probably all treat your patients well anyway, but you would be much more inspired and motivated to do so if your employer treats you really well. The last book that I want to look at is called Caring for Yourself, Caring for Others, The Ultimate Balance. And you'll see the little note down at the bottom of the book cover that says, this is not the actual book cover. The actual book cover looks like this. And the idea behind this book is that this book is written for caregivers. And the premise of this book is similar to Patients Come Second. We can't treat patients well unless our leaders treat us well. We can't treat patients well unless we treat ourselves well. So this is really kind of a neat little book. It's written as a sort of a workbook. It's got tons of chapters in it, and I don't know if you can, you probably can't really tell from flipping through it, but you can tell that it's set up like a workbook. They're very, very short chapters. I'm not listing the table of contents because there are many, many chapters in it. But each chapter is almost like a little blog post, a little set of tips, or a little exercise to do about taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your patients and be a good leader. It's not really directly leadership focused, but there's a lot in here that's relevant to leadership. And I just want to share one little chapter with you. This chapter is called I'm Only a Nurse. I'm only a nurse, or I'm just a nurse. If I hear it again, I'll scream. So often it's the response I get when I ask, what's your specialty, or what do you do? I've been involved in nursing for almost 30 years, and yet the answer has been surprisingly similar all this time. Ask the same questions to physicians and listen to the responses. No matter how many times the question has been raised, I've never heard a physician respond, I'm only a physician. Never. I wonder why. What do you think? Does it have something to do with the way we socialize one another? And then the author writes, nurses save lives, touch deeply, make a difference, raise kids, inspire elders, perform the impossible, balance, juggle, write articles, extend the gift of presence, accomplish more with less each year, conduct research, present scholarly papers, escort people into eternity, counsel, comfort, heal, soothe, care deeply, earn many degrees, including one in fine arts, have patience with patients, are remarkable in a crisis, take a lot of pressure, have more than a job or career, express commitment, compassion, diligence, and an extraordinary and anything, and are extraordinary and anything but average. Anyone who can handle and create all this is not just or only a nurse. As the ANA slogan said a few years ago, if you've got the brains, the patience, the heart, the courage, the commitment. Be a nurse. Don't put yourself down. And I want you to know how much I admire you all as nurses. I really, really appreciate what you go through. I've learned a lot about, I've obviously not a nurse myself, but I've learned a lot about what nurses go through from teaching this class several times. So I want to echo the author's words that you are so much more than just a nurse. And we're at the end of our time together, so I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed having you in this class. I want to thank you for your contributions to a great class and wish you the best of success in the rest of your BSN program. Farewell, and thank you, and best of luck and success.